Hi again. Me and Ted are back to read the very last bit of the story. So, the king, this is the bit we just read, just reminding you. The king shouted impatiently. Barley let the end of the rope run out round the tree trunk, and the great slab fell forward with a hollow sound onto the tops of the standing stones. And that's where we stopped. The baby had been saved, and all the cave people had made the standing stones, hadn't they? So let's see what happens next. And over the shoulder of the downs appeared a red spark, and the valley was flooded with light. It was sunrise. From the low mist in the bottom of the valley appeared the spire of a church, the tops of oast houses, and electricity pylons. The solid forest was gone, and there were the squares of cornfield, orchard, and hop garden. There were the villages and the distant chimneys of cement works, and the broad ribbon of the main road sweeping down the hill below. Barney looked round the hillside. The people of the tribe had disappeared. There were no huts, no sign of a campfire. They had all vanished with the last shades of darkness. But one thing had not changed. The 3 stones with the great slab on top were still before his eyes, but weathered now, with grey lichen growing on them. The mound was not there, but the stones stood just as they had done when he had let go of the last of the rope. Sitting against them was Lou, blinking her eyes at the rising sun, as if she was waking from a deep, deep sleep, and holding Dinah in her arms. "Oh, Barney, I've had such a funny dream," said Lou sleepily. "I'm glad I've woken up, though." "So did I," said Barney. "Are you sure we've woken up?" Lou looked around. "Well, I dreamt about a tribe of people long ago," she said. "They've all gone, and now it's now, so it must have been a dream." "What are we doing here, then?" asked Barney. Lou opened her eyes at that. "Good gracious," she said. "We don't usually wake up on top of a hill, do we?" She curled herself up at the foot of the stone and shut her eyes. "I'm going to dream myself back to bed," she said firmly. Barney shook her. "Get up, Lou," he said. "It isn't that sort of dream at all. We really are here. We've got to get back to Granny's somehow." Barney knew that it was something more than a dream. The tiredness in his arms and legs told him that he really had been hauling the great stone that looked as if it had been there for thousands of years. He walked round to the front of the stones, where the open side looked over the valley, and there, sitting in the entrance, as if it was his own front porch, was Stig. Barney gaped and Stig grinned. Lou put her head round the stone and gasped too. "Stig!" she exclaimed. "What are you doing here? If you're a midsummer fairy or whatever the others were, you're supposed to vanish too." "But I told you," said Barney. "Stig's always here. He's my friend." Barney and Lou had almost forgotten how they got back to the house that summer morning. They remember catching the pony, who was grazing peacefully on the hilltop, and riding back half asleep, clitter-clattering through the empty lanes with Stig walking beside them. There they are, can you see them? On the horse, on the pony, clitter-clattering through the empty lanes, and there's Stig, and there's Dinah walking beside them. And they remember falling into their beds and waking very late on Midsummer Day. Probably they agreed on the way back not to say anything about what had happened. Anyhow, what could they say? It wasn't until quite a long time later that they went with their parents for a picnic on the North Downs, where the 4 stones stand. And as they ate their sandwiches, their parents got into an argument about Stone Ages and Bronze Ages, and about how the stones had got there at all, until Barney said without thinking, "They had flint spears, and it was the heave-ho that did it." And everybody thought about this quite a lot and had to admit that Barney was probably right, though they couldn't think how he'd know. Ooh. And then Barney and Lou said together, "But I wonder how the baby got there." And that was a question nobody could answer. And what about Stig? Well, if you ask Barney, he will say in an offhand manner that he's still living in the dump. The grown-ups never really knew just how real he was, but they got used to the idea that wherever there was a pile of old thrown away things, an unseen Stig was likely to be poking around in it. And whenever there was a particularly odd job to be done, like making sure a rainwater butt didn't spring a leak when it was empty and overflow when it was full, or a new tool for lifting parsnips, then someone would say, "Let's get Stig to fix it." Actually, the dump's filling up fast now and Stig may be on the move. One report was that he'd been seen working at a garage by the main road where they collect old wrecked cars and put the pieces in rusty piles. Oh, I bet he'd make lots out of that. And someone else said he saw him in a back lane of that woody country at the top of the downs, mending a chicken run with an old wire mattress. It certainly sounded like Barney's friend Stig, but perhaps it was only a relative of his. And that's the end of the book. The book has finished. Wow. I enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed it too. So do you think that was a dream, or do you think that really happened to Barney and Lou? I think it sounded real, didn't it? And it doesn't sound like Barney sees Stig anymore, does it? Because he doesn't know whether it's Stig or a relative. Oh, there's lots of questions and lots of more story things that you could make up after that, isn't there? And lots of drawings you could do. I enjoyed that book. That was Stig of the Dump, and it was written by Clive King. I hope you liked listening to that. Maybe you'll have to give me some suggestions for more books to read. I'll be off now though. Got to do some more gardening. And I'll speak to you soon. Love you lots. Bye.